How my workplace bully got what she deserved after I quit. Hey Reddit, I've been lurking here for a while, and after reading so many stories about workplace bullying, I feel like it's finally time to share mine. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd end up in a situation like this. Bullied at work, pushed to my breaking point. But life has a funny way of surprising you. It's been about a year since everything went down, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on what happened. I'm in a much better place now, but there's still a part of me that feels unsettled, like I need to get this off my chest. So here it is, the story of how my workplace bully made my life hell, and how karma eventually came around and gave her what she deserved. I graduated from college with a degree in marketing, full of hope and excitement for my future. I was lucky enough to land a job at a mid-sized company in my hometown shortly after graduation. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a solid start, and I was eager to learn and prove myself. The first few months were great. I was part of a small marketing team, and I quickly bonded with my coworkers. My manager, Tom, was supportive and encouraging, and I felt like I was really starting to find my footing. I worked hard, took on new responsibilities, and was even starting to get recognition for my contributions. And then, everything changed when she arrived. Her name was Sandra, and she was hired as the new senior marketing manager, a position I had secretly hoped I might be considered for in a few years. Sandra came in with an impressive resume and a no-nonsense attitude. At first, I was excited to work with someone so experienced. I thought I could learn a lot from her. But it didn't take long for me to realize that Sandra was not the mentor I had hoped for. She was demanding, critical, and impossible to please. At first, I thought she was just tough, that she was pushing us to be better. But as time went on, it became clear that she had singled me out as her target. It started with small things, backhanded compliments, passive-aggressive comments, and constant criticism of my work. No matter how hard I tried, it was never good enough for Sandra. She would nitpick every little detail, find faults where there were none, and then make sure everyone knew about it. "Emma, did you really think this was the best you could do?" she'd say in meetings, her voice dripping with condescension. "I expected more from you." She'd give me impossible tasks with unrealistic deadlines, and then berate me when I couldn't meet her expectations. If I made even the smallest mistake, she'd blow it out of proportion and use it as an excuse to humiliate me in front of the team. At first, I tried to brush it off. I told myself that Sandra was just tough, that she was pushing me to be better. But the constant criticism and belittling started to take its toll. I began to dread going to work, knowing that no matter what I did, it would never be enough for her. I started to second-guess myself, to doubt my abilities. My confidence, which had been steadily growing, began to crumble. I became paranoid, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack. My work started to suffer as a result, which only made things worse. Sandra pounced on every mistake, using it as proof that I was incompetent. I tried talking to Tom about it, but he seemed reluctant to get involved. "Sandra's just tough," he said. "She's trying to push you to be better. Don't take it personally." But it was personal. Sandra's attacks were targeted and deliberate, and they were wearing me down. I started having trouble sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night, replaying her words over and over in my head. My anxiety, which had always been manageable, spiraled out of control. I felt like I was losing myself, like the person I used to be was slipping away. The breaking point came about 6 months after Sandra started. We were working on a major campaign for a new client, and the pressure was on. I had been pulling long hours, doing everything I could to make sure the project was a success. I was exhausted, but I thought it would all be worth it if I could just prove to Sandra that I was capable. But no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Sandra was relentless, criticizing every idea I came up with, dismissing my contributions, and taking credit for my work. I was burning out, and she seemed to take pleasure in pushing me to the edge. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal meeting where Sandra had torn apart my presentation in front of the entire team, I broke down. I left the office in tears and went home, feeling utterly defeated. I didn't know how much more I could take. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep letting Sandra destroy me. I had to take control of my life again, even if that meant walking away from the job I had worked so hard to get. The next morning, I handed in my resignation. Tom was surprised, but he didn't try to convince me to stay. Sandra didn't even acknowledge that I was leaving. She just smirked, as if she had won. Walking out of that office for the last time was both terrifying and liberating. I didn't have another job lined up, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But I knew I had made the right decision. I couldn't keep sacrificing my mental health for a job that was killing me. After I quit, I took some time off to recover. I had savings, so I wasn't in immediate financial trouble, but I was still anxious about my future. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened, trying to make sense of it all. I went to therapy, which helped me process the trauma and start rebuilding my self-esteem. During that time, I stayed in touch with a few of my former coworkers. They were supportive and understanding, and they filled me in on what was happening at the office. Apparently, Sandra was still making everyone's lives miserable. Morale was low, and several other people had left since I did. But then, about 6 months after I quit, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was from one of my former coworkers, Sarah. She sounded almost giddy with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Sandra got fired." I was stunned. "What? How? Why?" Sarah explained that things had gotten so bad in the office that people started filing complaints against Sandra, complaints that Tom could no longer ignore. Apparently, Sandra had pushed one too many people too far, and HR finally stepped in. They conducted an investigation, and it turned out that Sandra had been engaging in unethical behavior, manipulating performance reviews, falsifying reports, and bullying other employees, not just me. The company couldn't sweep it under the rug anymore. Sandra was given the boot, escorted out of the building with no fanfare. It was over. Hearing that Sandra had been fired should have made me feel vindicated, but instead, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was relieved that she was finally being held accountable for her actions. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for how things had turned out. No one should have to go through what I did, and it was frustrating that it took so long for the company to take action. In the weeks that followed, I learned more about what had led to Sandra's downfall. After I left, things had only gotten worse. Sandra's behavior became more erratic, and she started targeting other employees the way she had targeted me. The final straw came when she falsified a report that led to the company losing a major client. That's when HR stepped in, and everything came to light. It was strange to think that if I had stayed, I might have been there to see Sandra's downfall firsthand. But I knew that leaving when I did was the right choice for me. I couldn't have endured another 6 months of her torment, and I needed that time to heal and rebuild my life. As for Sandra, I heard that she struggled to find another job after getting fired. Word had gotten out about what happened, and her reputation in the industry was tarnished. She eventually moved out of town, and I haven't heard anything about her since. After Sandra's firing, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't felt before. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I no longer had to carry the burden of what she had done to me, knowing that she had finally faced the consequences of her actions. I eventually found another job at a different company, one that valued and respected its employees. It wasn't easy at first. I was still carrying the scars from my previous experience. But with time, I regained my confidence and rediscovered my passion for marketing. My new coworkers were supportive and encouraging, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of a team that truly had my back. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that it wasn't just about Sandra, it was about me too. I had let her words and actions define me for too long. I had internalized her criticisms and allowed them to erode my self-worth. But through therapy and self-reflection, I learned that her behavior was a reflection of her own insecurities, not my abilities. I also learned that I have the strength to walk away from toxic situations, even when it's hard. Quitting that job was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it was also one of the best. It taught me to prioritize my mental health and to stand up for myself, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against me. So, that's my story. It's not the kind of story with a fairy tale ending, but it's real, and it's mine. Workplace bullying is something that affects so many people, and it's important to speak out about it, to let others know that they're not alone. If you're going through something similar, please know that you don't have to endure it. You have the right to a safe and respectful work environment, and you don't have to tolerate behavior that makes you feel small or worthless. It's okay to walk away, to put yourself first, and to seek help if you need it. As for Sandra, I hope that wherever she is, she's learned something from what happened. I hope she's taken a good, hard look at herself and realized that the way she treated people was wrong. But even if she hasn't, I'm at peace with it. I've moved on, and I'm living my life on my own terms. And in the end, that's the best revenge of all. Subscribe and like for more videos.